Hello, I'm Jenny Ferd and welcome to my library. I'm a mechanic neutral mechanical engineer who's really into permaculture and wants to talk about books. So let's talk about books. There's no books in the background, sorry. This is like my new little nook and I am realizing it's cuter in real life because you can see this radiator here and you can't really see all of the paintings. So anyway, today I have my December reading wrap up. The reason why I'm doing this now is because it's the 25th of December, which is when I start my new reading year. And I filmed my year-end wrap up early, so I didn't capture all of the books that I was going to read in December. So I have like a completely unintentional theme this month, but let's get into it. I also have two books that I forgot to log, and so I forgot to talk about them in the year-end wrap-up, so I'll briefly touch on those as well. Also, how are we feeling? Do we like wrap-ups? Do you want wrap-ups? We'll see how it goes. I had done a few last year, and I did not keep up with it this year at all, so if you're interested in that, let me know. This is such a beautiful book that I have. That is Pearl by the Gawain Poet. Obviously I got this from some thrift store a long time ago, but it's got like a $1 sticker on top of another sticker on top of another sticker. So like this was deeply discounted. It is such a cool find. I can kind of understand why it would be discounted because it is written in Middle English, which means it's basically not readable. I'll show you what that looks like. A lot of things have changed in the English language since this was written. How did I read this book? Because I am not an expert in Middle English. I listened to a translated recording of this. I listened to a translation of this through LibriVox because, my God, this work is so old that even the translations into modern English are in the public domain. I listened to the Sophie Jewett translation. Pearl is, I want to recommend it to everybody. It was so beautiful. It is this poem about a man. He's frantically searching for a pearl. He's in the woods. He's like dropped his pearl on this like mossy bank, and then he kind of lays down, falls asleep. And then we are in a dream sequence. It's like one of the earliest dream sequences. And he sees this beautiful white pearl-clad figure. And it is the like spiritual embodiment of his 2-year-old daughter who died, who is his pearl that he lost. And she takes him on a journey in this spiritual realm to assure him that she is safe and taken care of. So it's really like a man having a spiritual crisis and working his way through and assuring himself through Christian faith that he doesn't have to worry about his daughter anymore. I have never been a religious person, but that was just such a beautiful, beautiful journey to go on. I just thought it was, again, the settings are gorgeous, and then the sentimentality, oh, it was painful. But this is one of my favorite books that I read this year, as I talk about in my favorite books video. That's Pearl. This book is a copy of Pearl and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which I will talk about later. Pearl is credited as being written by the Gawain Poet, so they think that the same person who wrote Pearl also wrote Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The next thing I read was a children's middle grade story called The Inquisitor's Tale by Adam Gidwitz. And the subtitle is Or the Three Magical Children and Their Holy Dog. And this has some really cool illustrations, kind of in the spirit of being illuminated. It's a very, very cool physical book to have. My cat's playing with a box over there. Boy's got to work some things out. Hopefully he's not too loud. I think the coolest thing about this book is that it is based on historical stuff. I really recommend reading the author's note, especially if you're an adult reading this book. The author's note, honestly, maybe even read that before you read the book. I read it afterwards. It is about these 3 children and a dog who are kind of like weirdly thrust into sainthood in some way. They become legendary because of the miracles that they're performing in the midst of an inquisition. And so they are at risk. They're kind of being tracked down by French, like, religious police. They're just seen as like a bit of a threat. They all have different backgrounds. This was a fun story. I had a good time with it. And weirdly enough, I was reading this at a similar time as I was reading Pearl. So we got like a little bit of religion on either side. One, some original text really going through this test of faith. And then this one, which was a middle grade interpretation of what the Middle Ages in France could have been like, especially from a middle grade perspective. Another interesting coincidence, I suppose, I read Strength of Love by Martin Luther King Jr. This one took me a while, I'll be honest. I was reading this for quite a long time. I was really interested in some of the initial sermons. I thought they were so beautiful and apt. I gotta say, I got to a point towards the middle. I can't remember which sermon it was. I kind of fell off. I just don't agree. I just don't agree in some fundamental ways. But obviously there's a lot of value in these writings. And again, so much of this book I think is excellent. I did have a little bit of a hard time through some of the sermons. There is some really interesting stuff in here. There is a sermon called How Should a Christian View Communism? Maybe a little bit towards the end. A little weird, a little interesting, definitely like a product of the day and age. I thought I left the kettle on. The fridge is just making a weird noise. So I have to say, I really thought this was going to be a 5-star when I was reading it at the beginning. But again, there was just some stuff I couldn't get behind, and I gave it 4 stars. Still, highly recommend reading this. It was so well worth reading. I did notice something very interesting, especially being somebody who was not raised with a religion. There is mentioning in this work and in this work of something. Also, must have gotten these from the same thrift store. This is not exactly in English that I understand. Basically, it's talking about this like ideal world that is described in Revelations, where it's of equal length, width, and height. And that is actually the basis for one of the sermons in this book. So I saw it in both of them, and I was like, that's so strange. What is that? Now I'm really interested in reading Revelations. It is the sermon 3 Dimensions of a Complete Life. That's on page 67. This sermon is based off of the length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. So this is Revelation 21:16. There is an interpretation of it here, which is, I think, a huge stretch, to be completely honest. Definitely made me more interested in reading Revelation. Then I read a graphic novel, a children's young adult graphic novel called The Witch Boy by Molly Knox Ostertag. And at the beginning, I have to say, I was a little bit struggling through it. I have such a hard time with graphic novels sometimes. I get this like sense of cringe that I have a hard time shaking. But I have to say, The Witch Boy overcame that for me, which is really wonderful. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It is about this boy who doesn't really fit in. He lives in this weird, like, secluded community where the girls are witches and the boys are shapeshifters. And he feels way more drawn to being a witch than being a shapeshifter. And there is like this demonic beast that group of people is fighting. And anyway, I did enjoy it. There were aspects of it that did remind me of my favorite graphic novel, which is Snapdragon. But comparing anything to Snapdragon is a little unfair. Solidly good. I finally got around to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and I read the translation by Jessie L. Weston, also through LibriVox. Now, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is like a completely different tone than Pearl. Pearl was very sentimental, very serious, very beautiful and touching. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a wild ride, and it's kind of goofy, fun fantasy world. We open the scene, we're like at the round table with Sir Arthur. There's this visitor who comes, and he is a fully green man with a green horse. He comes in, barges in, and he's I was still a little confused about like what the hell happened, but he's like, you can take a swing at me, anybody who wants to. And then like there's like oh, if you take a swing at me, then in a year from now, it's on like it's like around Christmas or New Year's, then I can take a swing at you and you have to like come find me. Super weird. Gawain, Sir Gawain, goes up to him and takes a swing at him, fucking cuts his head off, and the Green Knight takes his head and just goes and is like, hey man, I'll see you in a year. Bizarre. This story felt so reminiscent of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, in like we get our little pony and we ride off and we like find this little castle and we hang out at the castle for a little bit, and then we ride off and we find the Green Knight's castle, and there's like descriptions of like while he's trekking to find this place, he like fights like random monsters and dragons and stuff, and I'm like, oh my god, this is fan fiction. Anyway, I had a great time with it. This text has a full description of, there's like 3 hunting scenes, and one of the hunting scenes afterwards, there's a description of like disemboweling and like preparing this animal. So the translation of this story did not include that description at all. It was like a full passage that they were just like, nobody needed to hear this. We don't need this. I thought that was kind of funny because I was reading along with the text and I was like, wait, we just skipped a whole thing. And I read the description. Oh, I flipped to the page. It's this footnote here. It says, and had them neatly cut up as custom demands. They examined some of them and found 2 finger breadths of fat on the poorest of them all. Then they slit open the slot, the hollow running down the middle of the breast, took hold of the first stomach, cut it away from the flesh with a sharp knife and tied it up. And that goes on for a long time. This whole section is about disemboweling this animal. So anyway, I gave Sir Gawain and the Green Knight 4 stars. It was super fun, but it's not like life affecting. Then I read a handful of books from NetGalley, and one I read was Saint Catherine, which again, more religious work. This is wild. So this is by Anna Mayer, and I gave this 5 stars because I thought it was extremely well done. And I have to say, with books from NetGalley, even if like I personally don't feel like it's affected my life to the extent that I would give it 5 stars, if I'm like can't find anything wrong with it, I'm going to give it 5 stars because I feel like I have to portray this for the people and not just for myself. So I will say that NetGalley is definitely changing the way that I rate books when I'm doing it for NetGalley. If this was just for me, I would have rated it 4 stars because it didn't have that like long-standing emotional impact, that like great importance and weight on my life. But again, like I said, I couldn't find anything wrong with it. I guess I'll read you my review. St. Catherine is a lovely graphic novel about a 20-something woman who is going about her normal life. She has beautiful friendships, a job she doesn't like, a caring boyfriend, a slightly overbearing mom, and a weekly ritual of going to Mass on Sunday, until one Sunday she doesn't go. After a series of seemingly inconsequential events, she becomes possessed by demons from hell. This graphic novel is lovingly observant to real life, in both the artwork, which features details like earrings on the side table, and the writing, with moments like Catherine explaining how she wanted blonde highlights when she was 13. It's details like these that get you so invested in her story. This story is about guilt, lies, and being a human with Catholicism inextricably woven into one's life. Loved the character Manolo. Some elements of the story feel slightly unresolved, but in that way it feels true to life. I thank NetGalley and First Second for the e-arc in exchange for an honest review. That is really how I felt about it. I thought the artwork was really good. I loved the artwork. The story was also really good. And again, as I mentioned, it felt so human. These characters have flaws, especially Catherine has like some deep flaws. I really appreciated seeing how that ends up for her. Like, it's not tidy because it can't be. So yeah, I am really happy that I got to read that. We don't even break away from the religion. We do with this next book, but we don't after that. So this next book I read was Yayoi Kusama by Maria Isabel Sanchez Vergara. You might remember this name because this is the same author as the, how have I forgotten his name? Saint-Exupéry. This has never happened to me. This is like my favorite man in the literary world. Oh my god, I can't remember it. De Saint-Exupéry. Anton de Saint-Exupéry. This is the same writer as that children's book about Anton de Saint-Exupéry that I also got from NetGalley and reviewed earlier this year. I loved this. Yayoi Kusama is the artist who does the dots, and she does those infinity rooms. So why did I read this Yayoi Kusama book? I saw her artwork when we went to the San Francisco MoMA earlier this year, and she had this gigantic pumpkin sculpture, and she also had one of those infinity rooms. And there were in the line for the infinity room, because it was an incredibly popular exhibit and it's got like limited capacity. In line for that, there was this stuff on the wall that was like quotations from her about her work and how she sees the world. And she talks about dots and the universe and the interconnectedness of things and how people are all dots and everything is dots. And I was like, what is she on about? I didn't think it was authentic. I was just like, okay. I was completely wrong. It is so authentic to who she is. This story really taught me so much about her that I didn't know. It very deftly, in my opinion, for a children's book, handles topics like depression and mental health and going to like a psychiatric hospital well, and also having a bad upbringing. I thought this was excellent. The illustrations are also so cute and beautiful and kind of introduce you to her artwork. I gave it 5 stars. This I also got from NetGalley. We're back on our religious trend. This was One Little Goat by Dara Horn and illustrated by Theo Ellsworth. This is a Passover catastrophe. This book's all about Passover. This is a wildly illustrated. The illustrations are super chaotic, which really suits the vibe of this story and what's going on. It felt a little like 1990s Nickelodeon cartoon in like how absurd everything was. Kind of like got that kind of gross illustration style. I really enjoyed this, and I learned so much about Passover. I knew nothing about Passover, and this really taught me a lot. I think its intention is to teach children who probably do celebrate Passover a little bit more about the context of Passover, and also to kind of give some context to children about like how their parents are also just people, which I think is a really weird and hard message for kids to absorb. Anyway, I thought it was really, really well done. I ended up giving it 4 stars. And then the very last book that I read was the Gnome book, and I haven't rated that yet, so I guess we're gonna wing it. This is straight up a children's book. This is for children. This is only for children. But I can really imagine this being a great book for children. It puts you into this gnome world. It teaches you about gnomes, completely bogus facts about gnomes, but it feels like kind of informative, and what I can really imagine it doing is spurring a lot of imaginative play, going around the house, like making little gnome hats, looking for traces of gnomes, building tiny things for gnomes. Like, I can really imagine it allowing a child to have a lot of fun and giving them just little pieces to hold on to and have fun with. It also has really cool illustrations where each page has like a lot of things to look at, which I thought was fun. It was a little hard for me to see everything that I would have seen with like a big physical book, just because I do read these on my phone. So I have to like, you know, zoom into things to see everything that's going on. I thought it was good for sure. Probably give it a 4 out of 5. Now I have 2 books that I completely forgot to include in my year-end wrap-up. One of those is The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch, which I have talked about on this channel before. This was a nonfiction book. This is inspired by this lecture series at Carnegie Mellon, I believe. At least Randy Pausch was a professor at Carnegie Mellon. This guy has terminal cancer, and he's like, well, I'm gonna put my all into this last lecture. And he also writes this book mainly for his children. And I think that's my main beef with it. I'm like, I don't really know why this had to be published to the world. I think this is really for his kids. I didn't particularly enjoy this. I think I rated it 3 stars, and I am going to be donating this. My next book that I completely forgot to talk about, really, really enjoyed, that's Food Freedom by Robin Greenfield. This man was so inspiring to me, continues to be inspiring to me, in me transforming my front yard into a food forest. I'm looking out right now at an apple tree, a plum tree, a cherry tree, artichokes, a lemon tree, pineapple guavas, like, and also so many beautiful flowers for the insects and all that. So anyway, I gotta say, incredibly inspiring person. I truly recommend a series of YouTube videos that he made in 2019 when he is going through this project of growing and foraging 100% of his food for a year. He truly does that. It's incredibly inspiring. You go through his whole journey, and if you did watch that YouTube series, I think this will fill in the gaps of what you didn't see, especially his time when he goes back to Wisconsin in the summer, and also like more about his mental state, what he was thinking about, and his like struggles that he maybe wasn't exactly showing when he was doing those videos. I thought this was excellent. I'm not sure what I rated this, to be completely honest. I rated this 4 stars. I knew a lot of this information already because I had watched that video series. Anyway, I definitely recommend this to people, especially if you have any interest in the food system, in food waste, in growing your own food, in community-led initiatives for food security and food sovereignty. Highly recommend this. I'm super passionate about this kind of thing. As you can imagine, I say I'm really into permaculture at the beginning of every video. That is my December wrap-up, plus the 2 books that I completely forgot in my year-end wrap-up. So that is a year of reading shut and closed. I ended up reading 131 books, as long as I didn't forget anything else, plus the 20 picture books that I chose not to log that I read in the middle of summer. And I gotta go do that last rating for the year. And then you know what I think I'm gonna do? I think I'm gonna switch my platform from Goodreads to something else. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know, what did you read this December? What was your favorite thing that you read this December? Was there anything super underwhelming? Did you have a theme to what you read? Because evidently my theme was religious. Weirdly enough, extremely religious December. 'Tis the season. If you enjoyed this, share it with a friend who you think would also enjoy it. Consider liking and subscribing, and I will be back again soon.